All right. But I'll be reviewing patients' rights and abuse and neglect. So with Seaside, we do have a policy on that, and that's in accordance with federal and state laws. The patient's Bill of Rights is adapted from the mental health law for the state of Louisiana. So at check-in, when patients check in with the MHT and they sign their admission agreement, they get their patient handbook, which has the patient's Bill of Rights in there. And then also when they meet with case management and they go over all admission paperwork, you review patient's Bill of Rights also. Patients should be notified of their Bill of Rights, and then we do have to have documentation that they were given a notice of it, which we keep in their record. We do have to have written copies prominently displayed, so if you've been in any of the houses, you'll know that the Bill of Rights is in there, as well as the local agencies that they need to contact if there's any incidents of abuse or neglect. And then family members or significant others can also request copies should they choose. I'm not gonna go over all of the patient Bill of Rights, but I'll just kind of go over a few. The patients, they have the right to privacy when they're being examined or interviewed, the right to be informed and participate in decisions involving their treatment. They are members of their treatment team. We tell them that often. We want them involved in their treatment planning. They're not the only, persons to make decisions about it, but they're definitely, their input is valuable. And then also, they have the right to examine and receive an explanation of their bills. Case management passes that information out. And they also have the right not to be mistreated, abused, or neglected while in treatment, which is what's going to lead into the next portion of the interviews. So with that, Seaside does have a policy on abuse and neglect to make sure that patients are protected from it. And then again, state law requires that every patient will be guaranteed freedom from abuse and neglect. It is required that employees report cases of suspected or observed abuse and neglect, abandonment, or exploitation, and that's as it relates to children, those that are unmarried or unemancipated persons who are 17 years or older, or when it comes to adults, that's disabled adults ages 18 years or older with physical or mental incapacitation, as well as elderly persons ages 60 or older suffering from infirmities of age. So a few definitions. We're all caregivers, meaning we're entrusted individuals, and we're responsible when it comes to providing service to those individuals, whether it's temporary or on a permanent basis. And that also includes, but is not limited to, relatives, household members, guardians, neighbors, and employees and volunteers of facilities. As caregivers, some of us are mandated reporters, meaning when abuse or neglect comes up, we have an obligation to go ahead and make that report, okay? Some of those who are mandated reporters also includes health practitioners, mental health and service practitioners, members of the clergy, teaching or child care providers, police officers, law enforcement, court-appointed special advocates, and also organizational or youth activity providers, as well as coaches. When we talk about abuse, the definition of abuse is any non-accidental act or any willful act or threatened act that results in any physical, mental, or sexual injury that causes or is likely to cause physical, mental, or emotional health to be significantly impaired. And that includes acts and omissions, so whether something is being done or a failure to do something. Can y'all tell me what the different types of abuse there are? Just based on your knowledge, what different financial abuse, verbal, physical, sexual, all of those are different types of abuse. With physical abuse, that can be seen, that's physical harm. It can be seen as bruises, welts, burns, cuts, fractures, sprains, wounds, and just if you see blood. With financial, it might be the case of unusual banking, unpaid bills, unexplained loss of someone's property or money. With psychological, the individual may be vague or unwilling to discuss certain incidences, may be secretive about some things. And then with sexual, that can go from exposing oneself to flirtatious behavior and also fondling of self or others. With neglect, there's passive neglect and active neglect. And that's when a caregiver fails to meet the physical, social, and or emotional needs of the person, such as evidence that personal care is lacking or neglected, signs of malnourishment or dehydration. And the difference lies with the intent of the caregiver. With active neglect, the person is deliberately, failing to meet an obligation. And with passive neglect, that's when it may result from caregiver overload. And sometimes we'll have those situations where we've had payees kind of taking on so many patients that when it comes to a patient getting finances, like they're having trouble reaching the payee and then they're going without. So then they're not, that would fall under neglect. And then there's threatened harm. That's a situation, circumstance, or behavior which may lead a prudent person to have a reasonable cause to suspect abuse or neglect has occurred or may occur in the immediate future if no intervention is provided. So that might be like if you hear a child stating, my dad's gonna kill me, or they're kind of making comments, out of fear, or I'm gonna get a whipping if I, please don't tell my mom, she's gonna whip me. Another example, fear or anxiety about going home. So sometimes the individual may be reluctant to return home. And then also reports of unusual types of punishment. And then the individual may also express fears about certain individuals. With abandonment, that's when a parent or legal custodian or the person responsible for an individual's welfare, although able, does not make provision for support and makes no effort to communicate with the individual. So they've kind of just completely abandoned the person at that point. And then there's also exploitation. That's when a person in a position of trust and confidence with an individual and knowingly by deception or intimidation obtains or uses or endeavors to obtain or use an individual's funds, assets, or property with the intent to temporarily or permanently deprive the individual of their opportunity to use their own funds or property. Suspicion of abuse or neglect, abandonment or exploitation may be evidenced by a patient report, suspicion of malnutrition and or dehydration, history of or current multiple suspicious physical injuries, apparent fear of a caregiver or significant other, refusal of parent or guardian to respond to treatment teams' requests for family meetings, and also failure of caregiver to provide appropriate medical care. So with the mandated reporting laws, there are some, if the incident is something that happened externally, which means it might just be making a report to the agency, appropriate agency. When it comes to internal reports, we do have processes here, and that's kind of all based on our policies and procedures. So actions should be taken to safeguard the patient. The administrator should be notified. The attending physician should be notified. The employee witnessing the event should fill out an incident report. The MD or nurse should assess the patient, and then a multidisciplinary note should be completed indicating what happened and what safeguard was taken, along with any other pertinent information. Staff member witnesses, suspects, or discovers a violation of patient's rights due to abuse and neglect should report the incident to their immediate supervisor, and the staff member involved, whoever committed the act, may be suspended pending further investigation and can possibly lead to termination. There's a non-retaliation policy. If you do make that report, we do want to make sure that we're doing what we need to do to make sure our patients are being cared for properly. We do have an obligation, you know, as I said, to do what's gonna be in the best interest of the patient. Some of the reporting agencies are the Office of Adult and Elderly Services, Department of Child and Family Services, the Abuse Hotline, East Baton Rouge Sheriff Department, as well as Louisiana State Police. And we do have those numbers posted in the patient's houses, as well as the number for them to contact the mental health advocacy. And I just want to say, we just want to be mindful of this, like especially therapists, case managers, you know, just in your interactions with patients. They may give you some of that information. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that everybody's safe. So if you do have any additional questions or anything based on a specific situation, please see myself, Sally, and then we'll kind of go from there. And that's kind of all I had, just a little tip.
Thank you.